Well, it's about to rain and the Samurai's outside, but we're about to bring it inside because today we're throwing on hydraulic assist for the Samurai. Oh. So these parts are actually a part of the original Trail Tough kit that I purchased. In my last video, I only did power steering and power steering pump, but the box is tapped to take some of these hoses down to a ram. So these are the parts left over. I was gonna save it for the Toyota axle install because I don't really need them with 33s, but even with these 33s, I can hear my power steering pump whining a little bit. When we're in the rocks, I can kind of hear everything struggling. So this will just be like a super steering stabilizer plus some assist to get the tires turned. So we've got it, might as well install it. The first thing I'm gonna do is take all these tabs and heims out of the packaging, thread them on, and I'm gonna look under the Samurai and see what kind of orientation this should be mounted. The Samurai has high steer, so that does add a little bit of level of difficulty to getting everything lined up right. But remember, the key for putting hydraulic assist on is that it's running parallel with your tie rod, and then it's also running parallel this way. So you want it to just be in line with that tie rod so everything's pushing nice and straight and nothing's getting bound up. So we've got a few different ways this can work. The way I like to do it, I usually like to run mine so the ram is pushing off towards the end of the tie rod and not pushing towards the middle, because if you get any bends in your tie rod and that ram gets put out at a weird angle, it can just start pushing out on your tie rod and bend it even more. It is rare. It's never happened to me, but I'd like to prevent that. But like I said, it all has to do with how that's gonna fit down there and what kind of clearance we have. All right, so I took the caps off the ram here. I collapsed it all the way, measured it out from eye to eye. It was 16 inches, and now I've got to extend it as far as it can go, and it's at 22 inches. So that means when we're dead center, we're gonna need it to be the center of that stroke. If you have some weird measurements on the ram you're doing, or even a steering stabilizer, just add the two numbers up and then divide that sum by 2. So in this case, the middle point is 19 inches eye to eye. So there's 3 inches of stroke each direction. We've got to get this thing to 19 inches so it's centered in the middle of its stroke. It's about 3 inches down. Nice, nailed it. Okay, so now that we're there, I'm gonna throw the caps on. That's gonna kind of lock it in place. It's not gonna allow air to come in and out, and it's gonna be really hard to move the ram with those on. That'll also help keep some debris out of there, make sure nothing's getting inside it. Now we need to go down there and figure out how we want this oriented. I think this part's gonna go on the truss on the front, and then this part's gonna get turned to the side, and it's gonna get mounted right to the tie rod. So what we're going to be looking for is anything interfering with either end of this. We want to make sure there's room for the hoses to come up and out of there. For the heim ends, what I ended up doing is just putting this lock nut on about halfway down the threads. That way we have some room, wiggle room on both ends. We can tighten it or loosen it on both ends, you know, in case something with our steering changes, or in my case, we move to another axle. Hopefully this one will work for that too. All right, so let's see if the idea in my head matches what we can actually do here. Yee, not looking good. That's pretty big. So that's only halfway right there. Yikes. When it extends, it would go all the way over here. So I think one way would be to run this off of your spring perch pad, but we're using it for bump stops now. So that's lame. I don't really want it in front because that's gonna make it vulnerable to hitting rocks. Might have to do it. All right, so these tabs are just a little bit too short because if we're gonna run off the truss, we need the tab to go all the way up here so it's parallel with this. These ones aren't drilled out big enough right now. I need to go get a 5/8 bit if we're gonna use these, but this is a 3-inch tab. I'm gonna see how this one lines up. Oh, so if we go as far over as we can on this truss without touching the bump stop, and then if we move these to be on the tie rod, that looks pretty dang good. Pretty parallel. From the top, it looks parallel too. So, all right, I think that's what we're gonna do 3 inches of stroke to the passenger. We've got enough room there. So I've got to go get a 5/8 drill bit to drill these out. This is a pretty big bolt that PSE's sending with these kits. And then we'll clean up all these edges, get them ready for welding. I think this is gonna work.
You feel alive, let's hit the dance floor. Don't work too hard, my break a backbone. Return of the Mac, the king is back though. Corvette and cash, I never lack though. Since all the songs, you know how that go. Fake holiday, my diamonds that cold. Versace trunks, I hit my backstroke. Knock on the door, she at the back, bro. All I really take is a little taste. Island girl, blue eyes with a little bass. Here for the thrill, on me to chase. Wanna vibe at the getaway. Shimmy, yeah, I got the semi-4 way. Step out the line like this a probate. You hit the line and try to locate. This for the time, got time for no day. One, too many ongoing. I'm crazy and I got bad ones and they ready. A good time, so now it's
All right, we've got everything welded on and installed again. I just need to put my castle nuts back on the tie rod, but you see I've got my ram mount on that end welded up. I've got our big 3-inch on this end welded up, and I ended up putting up a little bit of like a side gusset right there just for some additional strength. And then if you look at this straight on, depends on how the tie rod is oriented. Sometimes it can pivot a little bit, but that's pretty dang parallel. And then if you look from this angle, it's hard to see down there, but that is pretty dang parallel. So I think we nailed it on the orientation. I haven't bothered painting either end yet because I want to cycle it through and get the hoses routed and all that stuff before we do that, because if we have to wait on paint, it's a delay. If we can start getting the system bled right now, we can just take this ram off, hang it, and paint all this stuff. So that's what we're gonna do next. We're gonna start getting the fittings ready, and they're actually a bunch of pressure fittings that are a little bit tricky to get going. So we're gonna do that in the vise, and then we're gonna start getting everything plumbed in, and then hopefully we'll just start cycling this back and forth and get all the air out.
Really think I'm seeing things. Read the line in mid-between. Yellow light, I gotta speed up. Get home to a cold shower. Need that pronto. Look like a rave at the condo. Heck of a night in Toronto. She said, boy, you in Morocco. Pearl white mention in the top gold. Fill up my cup with the pop, whoa. High off life in the spot, dope. Running up the visa. Really talking to a real life Mona Lisa. Jesus pieces hanging out with the fleecer. So much going on, it's hard to focus on.
All right, so now I need to find our fittings. There's one right there in a kind of bad spot, but I'm just gonna run a 90 off that to get it back down towards the axle. And then the second one behind this hose right there, also in a bad spot. Should be able to do a straight with that one. So this is the fun part. I actually don't have the directions from Trail Tough, and I went on their website to go check it out. Looks like they don't even sell this kit anymore, which is a bummer for you guys because it's been a really great kit for me. But what I'm gonna do, hook it up, and I got a 50-50 shot on getting it right. We're just gonna kind of go for it. I might take it off on the tie rod end just so if it starts pushing against the steering box, it's not gonna bind up and get all crazy. All right, let's do it.
Bad ones and they ready. A good time, so now it's in the whip we left at. Can't remember anything, but I know we got lit.
Oh man, that's a real mess. Got power steering fluid everywhere under here. I got everything wiped up now and everything hooked up. I kind of just let it gravity feed into all of the lines and back into the box. And by that I mean I just watched all the bubbles come up in the reservoir. So after the gravity feed, getting all of the fluid worked in there, I've got it filled back up. And now with the engine off, we're just gonna go back and forth. I'm probably gonna do it like 10 times. Fill up the reservoir again, and then I'm gonna start it up and we'll go back and forth. Basically, I'll do 10 times, look to see if the levels dropped. There's a lot of bubbles in there. If there are either one of those things, then I'll top it off, let it sit for a second, and then just keep doing that over and over again. We've got the system bled. Got all the air bled out. Pretty much just set up, ready to go now. The lines, you can see they kind of go 2 different ways there. They both come out of the ram and go to the passenger side. They don't go back up the same way. They kind of do like a figure 8. Not the prettiest, but it's pretty much just a cosmetic issue at this time. Definitely not gonna hit anything, and I feel really good about the mounts. They look pretty stout. I did all the welds twice. I did one thin bead, and then I did a nice weave back and forth on the second round. So I feel like the ram is just like perfectly mounted, very parallel, left to right, top to bottom. You know, my only concern long term is these arms right here that are connecting the tie rod to the knuckle. It's pretty high up on there, so for a vehicle that has ball joints or a trunnion bearing or something like that, you know, those are going to get worn out a lot faster, I feel, if you've got a Ram on high steer. If we had the tie rod in these lower parts of the knuckle coming down here, and we had the Ram just running horizontal right here, I feel like our life would be prolonged a little bit with those, but, you know, it's a Samurai running 33s. We're gonna have to rebuild these knuckles pretty soon. It's just kind of something that happens with Samurai and Toyotas on big tires. You've got to rebuild them. I think what I'm gonna do for the last part of this video is just, now that I've got the tires on the ground and they're aired down, I think they're at like 10 right now, so it's not super low, but I'm just gonna try on the ground going back and forth and see how it is, see how it does inside, if I can do it with one finger like everybody always says, or if it just feels the same as when I had power steering. So that's the last shot for this video. Thanks for checking it out, guys. I'm sure you guys are gonna have some questions. If you wanna know all the beginning steps prior to this, check out the previous video when I just did the power steering install. That's a pretty lengthy one and it has a lot of detail in it. Otherwise, throw all those questions down in the comment, and don't forget to subscribe if you want to see more Samurai action. Next thing we got to do with this thing is take it off-road and try out the hydraulic assist. Thanks for checking this out. See you guys next time.